It begins with something ordinary. A hand reaching into a freezer, fingers wrapping around a frozen bag. And then, within seconds, something happens that most people would never expect. 2 fingertips go white. Not cold white, not pale, completely, impossibly white, as if the blood inside them simply vanished.
And then the color shifts. The white gives way to a bruised, deep blue-violet, spreading through the skin like ink through water. The fingers feel heavy, numb, alien. This is not frostbite. This is not an injury. This is the body doing something deliberate. Then comes the flood. Blood rushes back, and the fingers turn an angry, throbbing red. Pins and needles, burning, a strange kind of ache that feels worse than the numbness. 15 minutes later, the hand looks normal, as if nothing happened at all. This is Raynaud's phenomenon.
Here's the strange part. The body is not malfunctioning. It is doing exactly what it was designed to do, protecting its core warmth by pulling blood away from the extremities. But in Raynauds, this survival reflex is wildly amplified. The vessels clamp down too hard, too fast, and for far too long. A normal response turned into an overreaction. This condition has been known for over 160 years. In 1862, a young French medical student named Maurice Raynaud described patients whose fingers turned white and numb in the cold. At the time, no one understood why, but his observation gave this phenomenon a name, and that name has endured. Today, Raynauds is recognized as one of the most common vascular conditions on Earth. Globally, an estimated 3 to 5% of the population is affected. But in colder regions, the numbers climb dramatically. In parts of Scandinavia and Northern Europe, prevalence may reach 10 to 15%, especially among women. To understand what goes wrong, it helps to understand what is supposed to happen. When the body encounters cold, small arteries narrow in a process called vasoconstriction. Blood is redirected inward, toward the heart, the lungs, the brain. The fingers and toes get cold, but they keep working. It is an elegant, ancient system of thermal triage. In Raynauds, that elegance breaks down. The small digital arteries do not just narrow, they slam shut, going into a full spasm that cuts off blood flow almost entirely. The tissue beyond the spasm is suddenly stranded, cut off from oxygen, left to survive on whatever is already there. The sympathetic nervous system is the conductor of this overreaction. It sends electrical signals racing from the spine, down the arm, into the tiniest arteries of the fingertips, ordering them to constrict. In people with Raynauds, those signals are either too strong or the vessels are too eager to obey.
Deeper still, the chemistry is tilted in the wrong direction. The vessels depend on a delicate balance between molecules that open them and molecules that close them. In Raynauds, the constrictors, particularly a powerful molecule called endothelin-1, appear to dominate, while the relaxers, especially nitric oxide, fall behind. The result is a chemical environment that favors shutdown. Clinicians describe the episode in 3 phases. The first is white. When the spasm begins, blood drains completely from the digit. The boundary between white and normal skin is sharp, almost surgical. The fingertip feels cold, stiff, and eerily numb, as though it has been disconnected from the body. The second phase is blue. With blood flow blocked, the oxygen in the remaining blood is consumed and not replaced. The hemoglobin darkens. The finger takes on a bruised, violet hue. Some people describe a heavy, tingling sensation, a finger that feels like it belongs to someone else. And then comes red. The spasm releases, the vessels spring open, and blood floods back in. This is the reperfusion phase,
and it often hurts more than the numbness did. A deep, throbbing burn that can last several minutes. Paradoxically, the return of blood is what causes the most discomfort. Most people think of Raynauds as a condition of the hands, but the same vasospasm can strike the toes, the tip of the nose, the earlobes, and in some cases, even the nipples or tongue. Anywhere the body has small peripheral arteries close to the surface, the spasm can reach.
And here is what makes Raynauds so easy to dismiss. The episode ends. The color returns to normal. There is no scar, no bruise, no visible trace. The hand looks perfectly fine. But the event was real. The tissue was starved. And for the person who experienced it, there is a quiet certainty. It will happen again.
The triggers are everywhere, and that is part of what makes Raynauds so disruptive. It is not just winter weather. Reaching into a supermarket freezer, gripping a cold shopping cart handle, even walking through the refrigerated aisle can be enough. The body does not need to be cold overall. A single exposed hand can set off a full episode. Water is especially effective at stealing heat. It conducts warmth away from the skin far faster than air does. Washing dishes, rinsing vegetables, even handling wet clothes on a cool morning. For someone with Raynauds, these small daily tasks carry a hidden cost measured in seconds. But cold is not the only trigger, and this is where the condition becomes truly interesting. Emotional stress, completely independent of temperature, can provoke a full vasospastic episode. Anxiety, confrontation, even the nervous energy before a job interview can activate the sympathetic nervous system powerfully enough to shut down blood flow to the fingers. For people who work with vibrating tools, jackhammers, chainsaws, industrial drills, a different kind of Raynauds can develop. Called vibration white finger, this occupational form builds over months or years of repeated exposure. And unlike the primary form, it can become permanent, lingering long after the tools are put down.
Then there are the pharmacological triggers most people never suspect. Caffeine narrows blood vessels. Nicotine does the same. And certain medications, including beta blockers and some migraine treatments, can lower the threshold for an episode. For someone already predisposed, a morning coffee and a cold breeze might be all it takes. Raynauds does not affect everyone equally. Women are roughly 4 times more likely to develop it than men. The reason is not fully understood, but estrogen appears to influence vascular tone and endothelial function. Some women report that their symptoms shift with their menstrual cycle, improving during some phases and worsening during others. Age of onset carries clinical meaning. When Raynauds appears in a young woman, in her teens or 20s, with no other health concerns, it is almost always primary, meaning it exists on its own. When it appears later in life, or when it is unusually severe, clinicians begin looking for something deeper. Geography shapes risk in predictable ways. Populations in colder climates report higher rates, and symptoms follow the seasons, worsening in winter, easing in summer. But even in warm regions, air conditioning, cold workplaces, and altitude can keep the condition active year-round. There's also a genetic thread. Raynauds tends to cluster in families, and twin studies suggest a moderate heritable component. No single gene has been identified. Instead, it appears to be a polygenic trait, shaped by multiple genes that influence how reactive the vessels are, how sensitive the nerves become, and how the endothelium behaves.
The condition ranges enormously in severity. For some people, it is a brief inconvenience, a single fingertip turning pale for a few moments before recovering. For others, it is a prolonged ordeal, multiple fingers locked in spasm for 30 minutes or more, with significant pain during recovery. Most people with primary Raynauds stay stable over decades, but the range is vast.
What clinical descriptions rarely capture is the daily friction. Cooking becomes a negotiation.
cold ingredients handled with caution. Grocery shopping may require gloves indoors. Something as simple as pulling vegetables from a refrigerator becomes a calculation of risk. The cold is not just outside, it is embedded in ordinary life. For people whose livelihoods depend on their hands, the impact can be profound. A musician cannot play with numb fingers. A surgeon cannot operate without full tactile sensitivity. A chef, a jeweler, a laboratory technician all face the same unpredictable interruption. And the worst part is that there is no way to schedule around it.
Over time, something subtler happens. People begin to avoid. They skip winter outings. They decline invitations. They stay indoors when friends go out. The condition is not life-threatening, but it has a way of quietly shrinking the world, drawing tighter boundaries around what feels safe. And the frustration of not being taken seriously only deepens the withdrawal.
Beneath all of this, the physiology is layered and complex. At the neural level, the density of sympathetic nerve endings in the digital arteries may be higher in affected individuals. The neurotransmitter norepinephrine may be released in greater quantities, or the receptors may be more sensitive. Even a mild signal can produce an outsized vascular response. And then there is the feedback loop. The spasm activates platelets. The platelets release serotonin and thromboxane, both vasoconstrictors. These chemicals sustain the spasm, which activates more platelets. The cycle feeds itself, and it continues until the trigger is removed or the body's compensatory systems finally overpower it. A loop that the body cannot easily break. Now we arrive at the most important distinction in Raynauds, and it is one that changes everything. There are two forms. Primary Raynauds exists on its own, with no underlying disease. Secondary Raynauds is a symptom of something else, most often an autoimmune condition. The difference between them is not just clinical. It is the difference between an inconvenience and a warning. The good news is that the vast majority, roughly 80% of cases, are primary. The person is otherwise healthy, the blood vessels are structurally normal, episodes are uncomfortable but harmless. Primary Raynauds typically begins young, affects both hands symmetrically, and remains stable for life.
Secondary Raynauds tells a different story. Its strongest association is with scleroderma, a condition in which the immune system attacks the body's own connective tissue, causing fibrosis and thickening of the skin and organs. In scleroderma, Raynauds is often the very first sign, appearing months or even years before anything else. Over 90% of people with scleroderma experience it. But scleroderma is not the only link. Secondary Raynauds has been associated with lupus, rheumatoid arthritis, Sjögren syndrome, dermatomyositis, and mixed connective tissue disease. Each of these involves the immune system turning against the body in a different way, but Raynauds can be the thread that connects them all. When the secondary form is severe, the consequences become visible. Digital ulcers, small open sores at the fingertips, develop when blood flow is blocked for too long. These ulcers are painful, slow to heal, and vulnerable to infection. They represent the point where temporary spasm crosses into lasting tissue damage. And this creates a particular kind of medical uncertainty. A small percentage of people initially diagnosed with primary Raynauds will eventually develop an autoimmune condition. It can take years, sometimes decades. There is no reliable way to predict who will progress. So the question lingers, quietly in the background. Is this just Raynauds? Or is this the beginning of something else? One of the most elegant diagnostic tools is remarkably simple. Nail fold capillaroscopy involves magnifying the tiny blood vessels at the base of the fingernail. In primary Raynauds, these capillaries appear normal, neat parallel loops evenly spaced.
In secondary Raynauds, the pattern changes. Enlarged loops, irregular spacing, areas where vessels have been destroyed entirely. A window into the vascular future, visible at the edge of a fingernail.
Blood tests add another layer. Anti-nuclear antibodies, known as ANA, are commonly screened. A positive result alone does not confirm disease, but when specific patterns emerge, such as anti-centromere or anti-SCL70 antibodies, the picture sharpens. The blood begins to tell a story that the fingers alone cannot. Clinical context ties it all together. A young woman with symmetric symptoms, normal capillaries, and negative antibodies can be reassured. A middle-aged man with severe asymmetric episodes, abnormal capillaries, and positive antibodies needs closer monitoring. Same phenomenon, same white fingers, entirely different implications. There is no cure for Raynauds, but there are ways to manage it. The foundation is warmth, and not just for the hands. Keeping the entire body warm is more effective because core temperature directly influences peripheral blood flow. Layered clothing, insulated gloves, chemical hand warmers, and avoiding known triggers form the first and most important line of defense. When lifestyle measures fall short, medication can help. Calcium channel blockers, especially nifedipine, are the most commonly prescribed option. They work by relaxing the smooth muscle in blood vessel walls, reducing the intensity of the spasm. In more severe cases, other vasodilators and even targeted infusion therapies may be used to restore flow and heal damaged tissue. In the most refractory cases, surgery becomes an option. Digital sympathectomy disrupts the nerve signals that trigger the spasm. It is precise, delicate work, operating on tiny structures near the smallest arteries of the hand. The results can be significant, though the benefits sometimes fade as nerves regenerate over time. Botulinum toxin injections have also shown promise as a newer, less invasive alternative. From a scientific perspective, Raynauds occupies a fascinating position. It sits at the crossroads of vascular biology, neurology, immunology, and environmental medicine. It is a condition that asks fundamental questions about individual variation. Why do some blood vessels overreact while others do not? Why does the same cold stimulus produce a mild chill in one person and a circulatory crisis in another? Perhaps most importantly, Raynauds can serve as a sentinel. In the story of autoimmune disease, it is often the first character to walk on stage, appearing quietly, sometimes years before the rest of the cast. The ability to recognize it, to distinguish harmless from meaningful, is one of the subtler skills in clinical medicine. The body sometimes whispers long before it speaks. When the temperature drops, the body makes a choice. Protect the center. Sacrifice the edge. It is a strategy written into the deepest layers of mammalian biology, a thermal triage that has kept species alive through ice ages. In Raynauds, that ancient reflex simply overplays its hand. The fingers go white not because the system is broken, but because it is trying too hard to do exactly what it was designed to do. A protector that cannot tell the difference between a blizzard and a glass of cold water.